Note: the following pamphlet is an official manual on psychological warfare, propaganda, and subversion distributed to recruits in the U.S. Air Force in 1951. As you read this, imagine what it would be like if the United States government decided to use these same propaganda and control techniques on us, its own American citizens. Bullets or words? A brief presentation of the missions, aims, and techniques of psychological warfare. United States Air Force, Psychological Warfare Division, Directorate of Planes, DCS/0. Bullets or words? There are only two powers in the world, the sword and the spirit. In the long run, the sword is always defeated by the spirit. Napoleon Bonaparte. The fight and conquer in battle is not the supreme excellence. The supreme excellence consists in breaking the enemy's resistance without fighting. Sun Tzu, Chinese military writer, 6th century BC. The basic theory behind the use of psychological warfare as a military weapon is simple. Kill the enemy's will to fight without destroying his body. Bullets and bombs will not change the enemy's mind. It is true, he can be physically beaten and forced to surrender. But you have not captured his mind, and peace becomes extremely difficult. Words in psychological warfare, on the other hand, are aimed at the enemy's mind, which controls his body. Therefore, if you are able to capture his mind, you capture his body as well, and the establishment of peace becomes easier. The American Indians were masters in the use of psychology. They painted their bodies with weird colors, used blood-curdling war whoops to strike terror into the hearts of their enemies. The ancient Greeks, in addition to waging psychological warfare against their enemies, build up morale amongst their own people with the adroit use of colorful costumes, patriotic and martial music. Psychological warfare is not new. That psychological warfare is not a newfangled idea is illustrated on these pages by a number of historical incidents of its use in ancient as well as in modern times, and how efforts were made to exploit the psychological potentials of military weapons and combat operations. Everyone is familiar with the ancient legend of how the Greeks used a wooden horse, better known now as the Trojan horse, to infiltrate and capture the impregnable city of Troy. Long before 225 BC, the Chinese developed gunpowder, which they used in firecrackers to create more fear than actual damage. The ancient Egyptians, Persians, and Romans attached scythes and swords to their war chariots to scare the enemy's foot soldiers. Hannibal created terror in the ranks of stalwart Roman soldiers when he appeared at the gates of ancient Rome with troops carrying elephants. The Greeks made use of burning oil in their naval operations. The psychological effect of this weapon terrorized the crew of enemy ships. Psychological warfare has three major aims. Surrender. Persuade the enemy to stop fighting and give up. Destroy his will to fight. Subversion. Induce enemy groups to turn on their own political system and authorities by resistance, sabotage, and rebellion. Consolidation. Seek and obtain the cooperation of enemy population behind our front to protect our supply lines, communication system, troop bases, and support our military efforts. This is how modern psychological warfare is waged. Via grapevine. A universal medium for transmitting ideas, rumors, and news by the age-old technique of conversation. This person-to-person transmitting process is very effective with all races. Via radio. Radio broadcasting is one of the quickest means of reaching other peoples of the world, even behind the Iron Curtain. Via air. During wartime, one of the surest means of communication with the enemy is by leaflets dropped from planes. Psychological warfare is an effective military weapon. The full recognition of psychological warfare as a military weapon represents a great advancement in military science, both during World War II and the present Korean conflict. It was discovered that every military operation can be assisted by psychological warfare, which is of extreme importance when used prior to and in conjunction with our other weapons and combat operations. In order to get the best results from destructive actions such as bombing, strafing, and artillery barrages, it is necessary to give the fullest possible consideration to their psychological impact on the enemy and develop and exploit every opportunity to our benefit. In fashioning new psychological weapons, it is necessary to base them on sound scientific principles and an understanding of psychology, cultural anthropology, sociology, and other allied fields of knowledge. Psychological warfare in Korea. Since the beginning of the current conflict in Korea, from June 1950 to mid-September 1951, more than 600 million leaflets were showered upon communist forces and communist-held territory. Psychological warfare is being used with telling effect, and effectiveness well demonstrated by the fact that an actual account of prisoners of war taken by the United Nations forces shows that approximately one-third of them surrendered to this weapon. When it is considered the enemy suffered that many casualties, reducing the number of enemy troops that fire guns at our troops, and reducing that number without having to go out and kill or capture these enemy soldiers on the battlefield, it becomes obvious why psychological warfare has won the wholehearted support of everyone in the field, from our top commanders to the soldiers on the front lines, who must accept the surrender of the enemy troops. Teamed for defense. Your United States Air Force is working very closely with the other services in the development of new techniques, equipment, and media to make our military psychological warfare efforts more effective. Your opportunity in Psych Air. The United States Air Force's assigned responsibility in our military psychological warfare program is sizable and requires a considerable number of qualified military personnel in this specialized field for assignment to Air Force psychological warfare wings, major commands, and overseas posts. Qualified civilian personnel can now, in accordance with the provision of the Air Force Manual 36-5A, apply for direct commissions in the Air Force Reserve as psychological warfare or as foreign language propaganda officers. Applications may be obtained from the numbered Air Force in the area in which you reside. Psych Air, the U.S. Air Force word for air psychological warfare activities. U.S. Government Printing Office, 1951. Thanks to Obama, it is perfectly legal for the media to purposely lie to the American people. He quietly signed into law H.R. 4310 in 2012, allowing propaganda to be used on the citizens of the USA by its own government, essentially repealing the Smith-Mundt Act of 1948, banning the use of domestic propaganda.